Hi again. So I hope you enjoyed your coffee break and had a chance to speak with the sponsors and with each other. So one theme that's clearly been emerging over the past day or so and is a recurring theme across the Kurogo conferences is the importance of student engagement and involvement, especially in the creation and ongoing curation of the content of the mobile application. So with that, I'm really pleased to introduce to you Kate Hash, who's the manager for ITS Communications and Digital Services at UNC-Chapel Hill, an award-winning application. In addition to creating and managing the internal and external communications for UNC-Chapel Hill, she manages the digital services group that runs the 10,000 plus site WordPress service for the entire school. She also serves as a primary ITS liaison for the Carolina Go student team. And I want to say that since its inception several years ago, Carolina Go has been a benchmark for us, for the entire community, and an exemplar for student-led excellence, and the importance of which we heard from the outstanding student panel just now and throughout the talks at this conference. But we can't forget that effective student involvement requires strong and effective advocacy by the school staff and administration who provide the tools and the training and the support, and then step back and give the space for the students to come in and do their thing. Katie has absolutely been such an advocate, for which we are all thankful, and she's here to tell us more about that story at UNC-Chapel Hill and how she's doing work to make sure that that story goes on. So with that, Kate.
Let's go forward. There we go. So I had them put that in here this morning, you guys. Big game. I can't decide if it's evil or genius to have to give a presentation the day after a game and you go to sleep 1 a.m. just jacked up on life. I was texting my husband last night and I said, "Do you think I can just leave this picture up the entire presentation?" And he said, "No, that's not appropriate, but you can talk about it." This picture is also important. It'll tie in about a slide to why I'm here presenting by myself today. But I think it's also important because you can come to Carolina and you can not be a sports fan, and that's okay. You have still an amazing undergraduate or graduate experience. But for so many of our students, this is a critical piece of life outside the classroom. And so last night, watching this game and seeing the videos on Twitter of these students flooding Franklin Street, it's a really powerful moment because you realize this is just one of the reasons that you're here to help the students. So about Chapel Hill, we are the nation's first public university. We're located in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And I do want to say that having studied higher education for my master's degree and having worked at other universities, there isn't a town and gown relationship quite like Chapel Hill and UNC. I mean, it's really fantastic. It's something that we're hoping to harness a bit more with the app going forward and working with the Chamber of Commerce. And so it's just a really wonderful place to work, not just at the university, but in the town itself. We're part of the North Carolina system. I think some people can tend to forget that. They hear UNC and they think Chapel Hill, but in reality, UNC is a collection of 17 different campuses and really wonderful institutions. We at Chapel Hill have 18,500 undergrads, almost 11,000 grad and professional students, 3,800 faculty, and a lot of staff to support that. And we have over 317,000 alumni living in all 50 states and around the world. But I think the stat that always impresses me the most is just how many of those alums live in North Carolina. We take a lot of pride in educating students in our state and then keeping them here, particularly in the Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill area and the Research Triangle Park area. And we're also really good at basketball. I promise that this one was up there even before, and I was a little nervous that if we lost the game, I was going to be up here. We're okay in basketball. So who am I? I've been at UNC for 3 years. I, as Eric said, oversee groups that do web and design and development for campus. I'm the primary person that works with the students on Carolina Go, and I'm also the primary communicator for Central IT. So when we're migrating to big new services like Office 365, which we're doing right now, or when things hit the fan and services go out like our LMS or the network goes down, I'm the one who gets to craft those communications. I'm supposed to be here presenting with our student director, Brent. And about a week ago, Brent sent me a note on Slack, which is our primary communications tool, and he said, "Kate, I have to confess, I really want to be in Chapel Hill or Phoenix for the Final Four. He's like, I love Carolina Go, but I'm a senior. This is really one of my last big chances to kind of just fully immerse myself in this awesome experience. And so I talked to my boss, and we were emailing Modo, and we just decided you have to let students be students. And as much as we can get them involved in the work that we do and can treat them and see them because of their behavior like professional members of our staff, at the end of the day, they're students. So just before I came up on stage, Brent texted me. He had just woken up. And he said, you have to go onto my Instagram. I've got this awesome video. He was at Top of the Hill, which is a restaurant in Chapel Hill that looks down on Franklin Street, which is where all the big celebrations were. His name's Brent Comstock. You can look him up on Twitter. It's a very cool video. But I think it just goes to show that you really need to meet students where they are and accept them for who they are. And I'm just excited to be here today to talk about how great it's been to work with students. It really is the highlight of my work. It's such a small piece of what I get to do each week, but I just absolutely adore working with the students. Here's a brief history of Carolina Go. If you've been to this conference the past 2 years, you probably know our story, so I'm going to go through it a little quickly. We launched in 2014 as m.unc.edu because the students came to our CIO and said, our homepage is not responsive, and that is not okay. We need a mobile-friendly homepage for our university, and so this is how it started. m.unc, while still available, is not heavily used. Our homepage is somewhat responsive. We're undergoing a really big redesign right now. Our native app went live in October 2014, and we had a couple thousand downloads, but not much engagement with the app. We didn't see a big change with our app until August, that should be 2015, not 2016, which is when we did the redesign that you all know now, this very action-oriented redesign. And that's also when we implemented our mobile version of PeopleSoft in the app, which is only available through the app. That's the only way you can get to the mobile version. And so now we have about 17,000 downloads, and we're really looking to grow that number this summer by getting more involved and engaged with our new student orientation program. As we all know, it's much, much easier to get students when they're brand new to the university. We have a decent number of page views given our number of downloads, and what we have found is that students really want to redesign the app fairly often. They want to do a big redesign every 18 to 24 months. I was just telling Eric, we're about to, at the end of probably this month, launch a slightly refreshed version of this, so you should all go download it. It's going to be ready for the last week of class. We're going to do some fun kind of seasonal stuff for that. And I think, hearing the students up on the panel just right before me, students are so much better at iterative design than we are. They're so much more willing to just put up a new design and say, let's see what people think about it. Let's get feedback, and then we'll iterate on that. In IT, we can be so just insistent that we wait till we have the perfect product and then we put it out. And so for me, it's been a really great experience to work with students and adapt some of that into the other teams that I manage. And if you didn't already know, students launched our app and they continue to guide the app. It's a really exceptional team. So let's talk about where we've been with our team, where we're at, and where we're going, because we are in the process of evolving our team quite significantly. So pre-May 2016, our team was volunteer only. We had a very limited strategic plan, and we had no student hierarchy. So if you've worked with millennials, you know that they like this really flat, everyone's collaborative, we're all equal. And while that worked in the startup mode of the app, it wasn't necessarily sustainable going forward as we wanted to do new things. And so we reconfigured things a bit. We clearly defined two roles, and that was a student developer who was paid by the central IT organization, and a student project manager who wasn't paid but led the project, and there were a lot of reasons that went into why we paid one and not the other. And the student project manager is Brent, who is home in his bed right now. And we clearly defined our communications processes and our project processes. And one of our failings, though, was that we still only had this small team of students, about 5 students. We never expanded the size. And so we had a very limited worldview, a very limited campus view. And so while we love our app and we love all the content that's in there, it was becoming very clear to us at the start of this semester that we just didn't have enough representation from across campus. And that was something that we were going to need to solve going forward. So I sat down with Brent and our student developer, James, and I said, we've got to figure this out. What does the future look like? And we sat down and we thought about our challenges. So we are losing in Brent the last person who's really got that, I was here when this started. He's got that kind of intrinsic, organic excitement about the app because he was one of the people who really got it off the ground. And that's a really hard thing to lose, particularly when you're talking about something that is so homegrown and so student run. You wonder if losing that is going to affect the app's ability to continue. Continuity and progress over the summer. And I would say that one thing we learned, so I was on maternity leave from October to the very beginning of January. And Brent, being a senior, maybe wasn't as involved as he should have been. And it was amazing how quickly, in the absence of the two of us, the app kind of stalled. And that was a really important learning experience for us because we realized that going forward with the student team, we need to work on continuity and continual progress. We can't have these big gaps of time where there is not as much movement. And so a challenge, starting fresh with a new group of students. But you'll see that's also my opportunity. I'm really, really excited to start fresh. There's tons of new ideas. Just this past Friday, we spent 5 hours in a room, myself, Brent, and James, interviewing back-to-back every 15 minutes students for the new team. And to have that in such a condensed period of time and to interview all these great students from across campus was just awesome, and it was so inspiring. And to hear how students are using the app and the ideas they have for making it better, it was a really gratifying and humbling experience. Moving forward, we're also going to have more direction from ITS, because the one thing about me being out on maternity leave is that there was nobody there to just be that gentle nudge. A lot of what I do is just a gentle nudge. Hey, have you guys reached out to this department? Have we finished this little project? And so we need to make sure that there's more direction, and it's not just from me, that there's redundancies within my team to make sure things can move forward. So this is going to be our new student team format going forward. So you see ITS there at the top. We've got the student developer, who is James. James is moving from the student developer role where he currently is into the project manager role. Having that continuity is really important. Brent doesn't know how Kurogo works. He's been the project manager, but he doesn't really know how it works. And what we're getting by moving James up into that role is that we're getting someone who understands Kurogo and can lead the project. And we've hired a great new student developer that I'm so excited about. We're also going to have this student advisory group, and this is a new thing for us. And this goes back to figuring out that we were not representing well a cross-section of campus. And so 10 students from across campus. After the interviews, we're thinking this might be closer to 15. Our goal is actually to only have about 6 or 7 in any meeting at any given time. But if you've ever worked with students, you know that you need to recruit double the number of students that you actually want to show up to your meetings. And so we've got this great cross-section of students coming to work on the app from across the university. And I'm just so energized by meeting with these students on Friday. It was really wonderful. But I also want to say, this isn't in my slides, but the interview process, I think, was a teachable moment for me as a professional staff member for both James and Brent. And Brent has his own company, so it's rare that I feel like I'm teaching him something. But we had these students coming in, and there's a lot of things that happen when you're in interviews with implicit bias and certain biases that you can bring to an interview process. And it was a really wonderful moment for me to say, these are things we need to be aware of when we're talking culture and gender, because we really want a great team, and we want a diverse team, and we want a team that represents Carolina. And I think we were able to do that because we kind of set those norms at the beginning of our interview process. So I really would encourage you, when you're working with students, to make sure that you're taking the opportunity to mentor them and train them, because some of that professional experience they're going to have with you is going to inform the things that they do in the future with their careers, and I think that's really important. So what we're learning. So we put out this application, and we said you can apply for any of the 3 positions: developer, project manager, or advisory board. We knew that James was going to move up into the project manager role, but we wanted to keep it in there just to see what type of student we would get. Everyone wants to be the project manager. They all want to be in charge. We had a few kids who just said, I want to be a developer, but it was fascinating for us because you get these kids, they show up in the room and they've got a lot of personality and they want to lead the project. And that was a really interesting thing for us. And I think it's helped us realize that we have this larger advisory group, but we are going to need to provide the opportunity for people to be leads on certain aspects of the app so that we can really engage and harness that interest in leading and not lose those A-star, A-player students because they're not getting that opportunity to lead. The opportunity to work on a technical project is very appealing to students. And this is, I can't emphasize how much this bullet point came alive to me in these interviews this last Friday. Just about every single student that came through said, I love my group projects, which is, when you work in Comp Sci or School of Information and Library Science, or you're coming from the business school, which is where we get a lot of our students from. They do these group projects, but it's not real. And if you're sitting in your dorm room, tinkering around on apps with your friends, maybe you get lucky and you make a real app and you market it. But for the most part, it's not real. And what appeals so much to these students is the opportunity to work on a real project with real impact for their campus. And I can't emphasize that enough. That should be a huge selling point when you're trying to recruit the best students on your campus. This is real. This is not just another line item on your resume. When you go into interviews in the future and you're asked about times that you've collaborated with a team or led a project or worked with an administrative department, you're going to have a really good answer now and a real answer because of your experience with Carolina Go. Students are interested in multi-year involvement. We didn't find a single student who said, well, I've only really got a semester or a year to commit to this. Students want to be involved with something that is long-term. They get really invested in the app. They're really invested in their campus. And so that's another great selling point. But you also have to be clear on what your expectations are. And this is something that we struggled with year after year after year with saying, this is actually what our role is. This is what your role is. And so you have to be clear on that. And you have to also be honest that it's a constantly evolving thing that you're trying to figure out. And we have discovered that students with a business mindset fit really well with our needs and with our goals. And I don't mean go to your business school and find a marketing student or find an MBA student. It just means that students who have even the smallest sense of what it takes to work in a business setting, to build something from the ground up, that it's not just making an app, it's marketing an app, it's collaboration, it's outreach, it's all these different things. You want students who can kind of get that full picture. So, what's really important? So I was working on this presentation and I thought to myself, what for me, as the primary person on this app for the central IT organization, what's the most important things, top 5 things. And this is what I came up with: commitment from the student team. And this is something that we struggle with, because commitment is more than just a one-time commitment. It's the commitment to be involved over time, working on projects, sometimes working with departments or on modules or on functionality that you definitely don't even want in the app, but we're doing it, we're working on it. It's that commitment to the big picture. Number 2 is understanding the realities of the university ecosystem. And I think that we've heard this come up a few times. I need students that understand that on a campus of our size that is highly, highly decentralized, our central IT organization has about 400 people, and there are just as many decentralized around the rest of the university. And so there's a lot of politics at play. And I need students that really get that, or are willing to try to get that, because it does impact the work that we do. And I also, at the beginning of every academic year, kind of give this speech where I'm like, okay, once, maybe twice this academic year, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to say, this needs to be in the app. And it needs to bypass all of our processes, and it just needs to go in there. And it could be because it's a chancellor special project. It could be because politically it's something we want to do. It could be just because it's the right thing to do. And having students understand that 98% of the time they have total control and autonomy, but 2% of the time I'm going to show up and say we need to do this one thing is really important. Collaborative spirit. I mean, these students, we are off meeting with departments around campus. We are working on all different types of projects. We're working with technical people and non-technical people, students, faculty, staff. You really need that collaborative spirit. You need a diversity of experiences, backgrounds, and involvements on campus. And as I mentioned, this is something that I didn't think we were great about and that we're getting much better about. You need those different lived experiences on campus because students, depending on their majors, depending on what clubs they belong to, depending on where they came from, have very different ways that they're experiencing your campus, and you really want to bring that alive. Big ideas. And this was the exciting thing about Friday. These students have such amazing ideas, and they're really good at coming up with big ideas that are also doable, which is exciting as well. So I'm really looking forward to some neat new features in our app. So when Brent told me he wasn't going to be here, I said, all right, well, I'm going to make you do some homework then. And so I want you to come up with a list of what the 5 most important things are to you. And this is what he said. This is his list. And I want to draw your attention to a few things. Commitment. He also said commitment. And he meant this for both the students that we recruit. He really wants to see multi-year involvement from students, but he also meant it from IT. He wants to know that we're serious. A student-run app is a precarious thing, no matter how you try to word it. At any time, an administrative unit could just decide they want to own it, right? And so students really want that commitment, that we're in it just as much as they are. Collaborative spirit. You know, we can joke about millennials a lot. I am technically a millennial. I'm the first year of that generation. It makes me feel nice and young. They love to work collaboratively. They really do. They love to go out to departments on campus. They love the opportunity to work with administrative staff, and they love the opportunity to work with one another. And so we try to really harness that collaborative spirit as much as possible. And again, diversity of experiences. So students, really great students, want to work with other really great students, and they want to learn from each other. And it's so important that you realize that the students you have on your team now are a recruiting tool for the students you're trying to recruit for the future. It's just like regular college admissions, right? The student body we have now will inform the student body we get later. And so finding students with a diversity of experiences who can learn from one another. One thing I will say about the millennial generation is that they actually love to sit at a table with people who are not like them and learn from them. And so being a part of that with the Carolina Go app has been really informative and exciting for me. Oh, and free food. Never underestimate the value of free food, because I thought he put this on here as a joke. He's like, no, this is for real. Any chance you get to feed students, feed them, and they will typically come. So building a solid student team. So if you decide you want to start a student team, I think the best thing you can do is spend some time deciding what role you want the students to play and be really, really honest about it. So we are clearly at an extreme end of the spectrum in that the students run our app with very, very little involvement or minimal involvement from ITS. There's also this other end of the spectrum where there's no involvement from students at all. And I want to tell you that neither of those approaches is right or perfect. You really have to decide which model is best for you, and I encourage you to talk with other universities about what is working for them, what's not working for them, what they've tried before, what they're going to try in the future, because you really need to be honest and authentic in how you approach this process. Because if you put together a student team for students to run your app, and then they get in that room and realize all you really want to do is just say, this is what we're going to do, thumbs up, thumbs down, you know, that is not going to be authentic for them, and it's going to be really hard to engage those students in the future. You need to find the right students, and this is really hard, and it takes a lot of time, and it's something we struggle with. So for the first few years, we did what we called self-recruiting, where if a student graduated, they had to find their replacement. And we found great students. That's actually how we found Brent, gosh, probably 3 years ago. And so that's one idea, but we realized, I mean, really about this time last year, that's not a sustainable model. So you have to constantly be rethinking ways to get the right types of students. And I want to encourage you to look for pipelines that might exist at your university. And so this past Friday, when we were doing these interviews, I should start by saying that Brent is a Robertson Scholar at UNC. It's a really prestigious scholarship program, full tuition, full room and board, tons of stipends to travel and do different things and get technology. And you're you get a degree from both Duke and UNC, and you get to study at both universities. It's an amazing scholarship program, and I knew he was a part of it, but then we had a couple Robertson Scholars come through the door to get interviewed on Friday, and they were fantastic, and they were so impressive. And the great thing about the Robertson Scholarship Program is they recruit students from all across the country. They recruit students with all types of backgrounds and all types of majors at UNC. And so they are essentially a pipeline for a diverse group of students. And so our next student developer is a Robertson Scholar, and we have at least one other on our advisory board. And so I would encourage you to look for those similar types of pipelines that might exist at your university already and try to engage those students. You need to get clear on roles and responsibilities, and I cannot stress how much we have struggled with this. Surprisingly, the roles and responsibilities between IT and the student team have been very clear for the most part. Where we have struggled with is the roles on the student team itself. We can joke about bureaucracies and politics of university administrations. Students love themselves some politics too, and they will argue about who's in charge of a project and who makes the decisions and when are we going to do this. And so you have to be really clear on what the roles of each student on that team are going to be. And what we're leaning towards going to in the future is this idea of having leads on certain things. A lead for analytics, a lead for marketing, a lead for specific development projects that then report back to the developer. Because these students, this goes back to everyone wants to be a leader. We need to give those opportunities, but also because that helps to define roles, and we find that that really helps with our student population. Find double the number of students that you need. This is really important. Student schedules, they ebb and flow. A student will be very, very available and then suddenly not available. And so finding double the number of students that you need, finding redundancies in skills is really important. You want to give students clear projects and opportunities for collaboration. These micro projects within the bigger Carolina Go project have become resume items for some of our students. So we did a big bit of work with the advising group on campus. We've done stuff with edible landscapes, which is a special chancellor's project. We have our inclusive bathrooms map. We have all these very specific projects that students can now point to. They're not just pointing back to this bigger Carolina Go app, they're getting to reference very specific projects that they've had the fortune to be a part of. You also want to reward their participation. And that can be as simple as food, as pizza, as donuts at meetings. But I also mean that bigger picture. Find ways to thank students. Have your CIO take them out for lunch. If there are awards programs at your school, nominate them for awards. We're periscoping, so I don't know if Brent's going to see this, but we nominated him for a Chancellor's Award. I went to our CIO and I said, this application process is a bit of a beast, but I think we should do it because he's done a lot for us. And so find ways to reward the students that have helped you out and helped you build your app. I think it's really important to show gratitude to the students and really just every day in life, to be honest, but specifically to your students that are helping out so much, oftentimes in a volunteer basis. So questions. So over the past few years, Modo has sent a lot of people my way to talk about student teams. And there are questions that I hear over and over and over again, and I thought it might be helpful to go through them. What's the hardest part about working with students? They are very unpredictable. Students can, as I mentioned, be very, very engaged and very, very involved and then drop off the map. Even our best students, our most active students, and you just don't hear from them anymore. And so the struggle that we have is keeping constant engagement with those students, getting regular meetings on the calendar, things of that nature. So I said, okay, Brent, I'm gonna give them some answers to some frequently asked questions. What's the hardest thing about working with IT? And he thought about it and he said, I think the hardest thing for me was realizing that you had other projects you had to work on. And I was a little taken aback. I said, really? He said, yeah, sometimes you can be hard to reach. I need an immediate answer. I reach out to you and it might take a few days for you to get back to me on Slack or to answer my email. And here I was thinking, we essentially answered this question the same way, right? It's availability. In my perfect central IT world, we would have a regular meeting on the calendar where we caught up and we went over projects. And in Brent's perfect world, there would be an immediacy to the availability so I could answer questions and point them in the right direction. And I think that's something that I'm certainly going to be more cognizant of going forward, but I think you also have to think about, if you're building your student team from scratch or revamping it, is how do you find a way to compromise and meet in the middle on that? Because I think that would probably be a pretty standard reaction. But I was feeling a little self-conscious about this. I'm like, oh, I'm the problem, right? I'm just not available enough. I only spend maybe an hour or two max, sometimes not any time each week on Carolina Go. And then yesterday there was this great session, and I think it was Texas A&M and Central Florida were up here, and someone in the audience said, can you talk a bit about your staffing? Like, what do you do to get these apps going? And I think the Texas A&M guy said, well, it's about an hour or two a week, and the Central Florida guy said about 5% of my time. So it's pretty normal, right? The beauty of Kurogo is that you get to have all this technical framework there for you, and it allows people like us to manage apps and do it in very little or very precious few hours of time. But that also can complicate things when you're trying to work with students who want immediate access to you. So part of that is just helping them build an awareness that your IT organization, or if you're in a different department, that you have these other roles, and helping to set the norms with that. And then we have top tips for getting started. Think long and hard about what type of students you want on your team. It can be so easy in IT just to gobble up whatever students we can find, but you need to be really purposeful about the students that you find and base it on the goals that you have for the app. So we have this advisory board. It's called the Student Technology Advisory Board, STAB for short. I always joke that's what happens when you let IT people come up with acronyms. We come up with things like STAB. And STAB meets once a month, and it's where you take IT stuff that you just need to run by students, right? You take it to them, you make sure you're not goofing up on anything, you get the thumbs up, you get the thumbs down. That is not what we need for Carolina Go. We need a very active, engaged student team. But that format I just described might be perfect for some of you in the audience. And so when you look at all these different models, you really have to make sure that you're building something that's appropriate for your university and for what you can do. Also be very reflective of the time that you have to give to the app. I realized a lot in the past few months that I need to be more available to nudge and to help them, but I also need them to be more sustainable. So it's this constant back and forth. What have been your biggest challenges and success stories? So Brent and I actually had the same challenge on this one. And it goes back to the session yesterday on app proliferation around campus. So we got invited to this meeting back in January, and a certain group on campus wanted to talk to us about apps. And we were so excited. We're like, this group wants to get in the app. This is going to be fantastic. We show up to the meeting, and not only is it a rep from that group, but it's an agency that has already signed a contract to build them a freestanding app. And we were there to provide advice on how to get students engaged with this freestanding app. And I'm sure so many of you can relate to that you're not brought into these conversations until much later. And this group was a perfect candidate for building out a module in Carolina Go. But that was a conversation that couldn't even happen because that other train was leaving the station. And so the best we could do in that situation was provide our advice, talk about ideas that we had for them, but that is a challenge we face nonstop on our campus. And a lot of it is due to our highly decentralized nature. Carolina Go is for students. This other group doesn't necessarily right now interact a lot with students, but that's what they were trying to do. But they had no reason to know the app really even exists. It was in a casual conversation that they found out about us. And so we need to do more with educating our staff about the app and letting them know it's available for them. And I think our biggest success story, and this again Brent and I shared, was really highlighted to me on Friday when we were interviewing all these students, is just how many students use it in their daily lives and how important it is to students. transit, dining hours, library hours. You know, we talk a lot about the bells and whistles and apps and the ability to do big things, but so many of these core functions and the things that students depend on Carolina Go for are these very simple things, but they make their lives easier. And so hearing all that and interviewing these students really underscored for me the importance of everything we do for Carolina Go has to be about making this app better for the students, make it improve the student experience. And I would also say for me, the fact that this app 4 years in is still student run is a huge success story. There were points in this process where it could have been so easy for IT to say, oh, we're packing up, we're gonna take it, we can do a much better job, we can be more consistent, we can get more stuff in there, but we have constantly taken a step back and worked with students, reframed the relationship. And I think the fact that we're now setting the stage for students to continue managing this app for at least the next couple years, I think is, it's a great accomplishment and something I'm very proud of. I know it's something our CIO is very proud of. And I would encourage anyone, if you're not already engaging with students, to really consider it, because it will be one of the most rewarding parts of what you do. So thank you guys so much. If anyone has additional questions, I would love to take them. I've learned a lot about students. It is a little bit like being an anthropologist, I have to say.
My name is Robert with Virginia Wesleyan, and I'm actually thinking about doing exactly what you've actually been working on for this many years. Now, did you seek specific skill sets? I know as you were trying to build the team, looking for marketing people, IT people, business, you know, these kind of things, to really build out an organization, because it's like you said, one of the things, because I have a few interns that have been working on this, and what they really bid onto is the fact this is real, and not, you know, some fake project, but this is something that will have lasting impact. And so did you look for specific skill sets and as you look to build out your team?
We do. So we look for a central set of skills, right? You need to love the university, and that might seem so simple, right? It's not really skill-based, but you want people who are really passionate about your campus. There are some people who will come in who have great development skills or great marketing skills or great whatever skill, you know, you're looking for, but if they're not passionate about your university and the student experience, they're not going to be as helpful as you need. And so we look for people who love technology. That is like our baseline. You really have to love technology. One of the questions we asked was, what are your favorite apps? What are the apps you use every day? And without fail, every student pulls out their phone and just starts going through the apps. And that's important to us. We want to know that students are engaging with technology. But then we also look for these other subsets of skills: marketing, analytics, which we have not done enough with. We have not been smart enough with how we use the data we have available to us. We were looking for students that were doing some kind of neat new things. And so we got students that are interested in like 360 video, gamification. So we want students not that just have these very specific skill sets that will help the app, but also who are gonna help like make us all think like way forward and in advance and kind of blow my mind a little bit. But I think when you think about these specific skill sets, it's also important to make sure you have the projects for them. So it's all well and good to have a marketing lead on your team, but if you have no budget for marketing or no marketing opportunities, that student's just gonna get a little bored. So, but I would say you can start with marketing, analytics, design, so important. It wasn't until we had a design-minded student that we redid our app a few years ago, and of course now we love the design. So just think through those skill sets that you need, because that's what they want, is those real-world experiences. Other questions? Thank you, guys.